Every dollar in your bank account and nearly every unit of currency in the global economy is born as a liability. Commercial banks generate the broad money supply as interest-bearing debt, while the federal government funds itself by extracting wealth through taxation. A new legislative proposal, titled the Sovereign Monetary Freedom Act, provides a blueprint to dismantle and replace this architecture. As outlined in the Act's executive summary, the text specifies three outcomes: the end of fractional reserve banking, a national debt jubilee, and the complete abolition of the IRS. To anyone versed in modern monetary policy, these provisions immediately trigger skepticism. Printing money to eliminate taxes and erase debt historically leads to rapid systemic collapse and hyperinflation. We are going to bypass the political friction of passing such a bill. Instead, we will strictly reverse engineer the macroeconomic, legal, and accounting mechanics required to execute this text. The entire framework relies on a specific philosophical inversion. It redefines money, removing its status as a private, debt-based commodity and recategorizing it strictly as an accounted public utility token. To evaluate how an economy operates with zero taxes and zero debt, we first have to rebuild the proposed money creation engine from the ground up. Under the current architecture, commercial banks use ex nihilo money creation. When a bank approves a loan, it simultaneously creates a new asset, the loan itself, and a new liability, the deposit, expanding the broad money supply. Sections 5 and 6 of the Act impose an absolute legal prohibition on this mechanism. Commercial banks are stripped of their ability to generate new deposits when extending credit. That exclusive authority is transferred directly to the U.S. Treasury. Every new dollar entering the economy must now originate from the Treasury, authorized strictly by specific acts of Congress. This shift changes the role of the Federal Reserve. It ceases to operate as an independent central bank setting monetary policy. The legislation reorganizes the Fed into a subordinate operational arm under the Treasury, officially renaming it the Federal Reserve Monetary Operations Service. From an accounting perspective, the national money supply is no longer a byproduct of private lending, but a strictly controlled, legally authorized public asset. Centralizing issuance isolates the national architecture from private bank runs. However, if commercial banks can no longer create credit, capital must reach the public through a different mechanism to fund mortgages or business growth. This diagram illustrates the proposed supply chain required to move capital into the economy once the private money multiplier loop is broken. The process begins with the Treasury. Through the Monetary Operations Service, it issues and lends sovereign currency to licensed commercial banks at a negative interest rate. For every 100 units transferred, the bank keeps a fixed 3% presage fee as its operating profit. The bank then returns the remaining 97% to the Treasury over the life of the loan. Because the bank secures its profit margin at the source, it is mandated to lend those funds to the public at exactly 0% interest. Section 7 of the Act applies a similar structural overhaul to consumer deposits. Rather than acting as unsecured creditors to the bank, depositors hold 100% segregated sovereign money. The deposit is no longer a pooled liability on the bank's balance sheet. It is the direct, fully reserved property of the depositor. When deposits are fully segregated and backed one-to-one, traditional bank runs become mathematically impossible. There is no fractional reserve to collapse. Commercial banks shift from credit creators to public service intermediaries, managing accounts and evaluating loan viability for a flat fee. While this removes the collateral risks of fractional banking, the 97% return rate on every issued loan creates a continuous revenue stream for the government. In the context of this legislation, that 97% return flow is classified as seigniorage. It represents the value retained by the state on every new sovereign dollar issued for lending or public spending. The text utilizes this specific revenue mechanism to replace the federal tax apparatus, outlining a 3-year phase-out schedule. Year 1 mandates a 30% reduction in individual and corporate income taxes, offset by the initial influx of seigniorage from sovereign loans. Year 2 requires an additional 40% reduction, alongside the total elimination of all payroll taxes. By the end of Year 3, the legislation requires the complete abolition of the IRS, estate taxes, gift taxes, and any remaining federal income tax. The goal is an equilibrium where infrastructure, national defense, and social programs are funded through the issuance and return of sovereign currency, rather than the extraction of private wealth. Solving for a zero-tax state using seigniorage is straightforward on paper. However, it introduces a vulnerability. If a centralized treasury prints capital to fund government operations without limit, the currency's purchasing power will drop. Historically, unconstrained fiat printing by a centralized government is a reliable precursor to hyperinflation. To counteract this, the Act embeds a statutory inflation anchor based on Richard Werner's quantity theory of credit. The central rule of this theory dictates that new sovereign currency can only be issued for productive investments. Capital intended for factories and infrastructure passes through. Capital intended for derivatives or secondary real estate markets is blocked. The transition guidelines mandate specific criteria to define what constitutes a productive investment, requiring increases in capacity and imposing bans on asset speculation. Enforcement relies on independent audits for any issuance over $100 million, with final metrics verified by the Bureau of Economic Analysis. The funded project must demonstrably increase real GDP within a 12-month window. If the economy contracts, the Treasury is authorized to issue currency for large-scale public infrastructure to counteract deflationary pressure. Under this framework, inflation is neutralized by legally enforcing that every new dollar printed is matched by an expansion in real goods and services. Executing this migration presents operational risk. Moving a $21 trillion debt-based system to a 100% reserve model could trigger mass insolvency. To manage this, Treasury is required to execute the Sovereign Monetary Transition Guidelines over a 36-month period. Phase 2 introduces a national debt jubilee. This serves as a mandatory balance sheet clearing mechanism required to execute the transition. The guidelines outline a tiered relief structure, providing 100% cancellation for consumer debts up to $250,000 per household, as well as principal cancellation on mortgages and student loans. To stabilize the banking sector, Section 8 mandates statutory safeguards. Compliant institutions receive perpetual brassage rights and transition compensation to prevent insolvency. Existing public debt is restructured into non-interest-bearing sovereign currency instruments. Legacy private loans surviving the initial cancellation have their future interest rates reduced to zero. The Jubilee resets national leverage ratios. This establishes a deleveraged baseline, allowing the new money supply to operate without the pressure of historical compound interest. The proposed architecture combines 100% segregated reserves, zero-interest productive lending, and a government funded by seigniorage. The text describes this outcome as an honest fiscal paradise. However, the system has a single point of failure. It depends entirely on the rigorous, corruption-free enforcement of the productive investment audit criteria. If the definition of a productive asset is manipulated to fund speculative projects, the inflation anchor fails, and the system collapses under the weight of an expanding currency. The political hurdles to enacting this transition are significant. Yet, if executed exactly as written, the Sovereign Monetary Freedom Act presents a mathematically structured blueprint for a post-debt, post-tax capitalist economy.